believe it's Thursday at like 7, maybe.
That's a prayer.
Yeah.
Okay, so the second part of chapter 3 is still going to be linear programming, but we're going to talk about models that require the integer constraint and models that require the binary constraint. The integer constraint's easy. We won't even really talk about that much. We'll just do a problem, kind of show you where we'll use that. The binary problem, the binary constraint takes a little bit of time to get used to. So let's talk about the integer constraint. First of all, what's an integer? Everyone knows an integer is what? A counting number, right? Like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all through this class I've told you, hey, I know we can't really make 6.8 chairs or 32.5 of these things, but I still don't want you to use the integer constraint. The reason for that is when we use the integer constraint, we can't get a sensitivity report because it's not a smooth feasibility region, and we can't do that sensitivity report. So we want to avoid that if we can. Now there are times, however, when we have to do an integer constraint. Okay, when we're hiring, and one of the big examples of that is a staffing model. Okay, if we're hiring, either 2 people or 3 people, it's hard. I know there's part-time employees and those kind of things, but a lot of times we're saying, how many people do we need to staff? How many people do we need to have on site during this 2-hour window? Okay, so staffing models are a good example of a integer linear program. Other examples are things like if I'm building something that's not negligible. Okay, chairs, desks, those are small things, zappers. But if we're saying how many space shuttles to build, or how many aircraft carriers to build, that pretty much needs to be 1, 2, 3, or 4, right? It can't be 1.8. Okay, we say, what the heck, that's just 2. So there we need a constraint. So what I'd rather do for this first one is let's do one, okay? And this is one very similar to the problem in your take-home exam. So if you can do this one, I think you can do the one in your take-home exam, okay? It's going to deal with a couple different things, all right? But this is out on Blackboard under, I'll make sure I know where it's at, under Material by Chapter. Material by Chapter. Chapter 3. And toward the bottom, there's a document that says integer and binary example problems. God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's take a look at this. It says MECO Consulting is expanding its IT consulting business to the Blair County area. The company wishes to be able to serve at least 75 personal and 25 corporate accounts per week. MECO Consulting plans to hire 3 levels of employees: software engineers, IT specialists, and IT technicians. The following table gives the weekly salary level as well as the projection of the expected number of accounts each can service weekly. And there's the table. Additionally, MECO Consulting wants at least 50% of its staff to be either software engineers or IT specialists. Determine the number of employees MECO Consulting should hire to meet its needs and minimize total weekly costs. Okay. So what am I deciding? What is MECO Consulting deciding here? Let's talk about decision variables first. What am I deciding? Okay. And in fact, we're talking about the number of, software engineers to hire, the number of IT specialists to hire, and the number of IT technicians, right? Okay. And what about that? We're talking about staffing. We're also going to say, hey, these things are integer. Okay? These are integer because we can't hire a third of a person. I know there's partial staffing and job sharing and other things like that, but we're hiring either 2 or 3 or 4. It has to be an integer. What is our objective function? What am I trying to do at MECO Consulting? I know quality is important, but what else? Specifically in this problem, I'm trying to do what?
Minimize total weekly cost.
Yeah, I'm trying to minimize my salary expense. So I would say, well, every software engineer I hire costs me $2,200 a week. Every IT specialist costs me $1,400 a week. And every IT technician costs me $750 per week. So I'm trying to minimize my total weekly salary. Makes sense. So if this was my model, I would just say, hire no one. I spend zero money. But what do I have to do? I have to service clients, yes? And it says I want to be able to hire or service 75 personal clients per week. And it looks like software engineers can do 3 per week on average. IT specialists can do 5. And IT technicians can do 5. We need to service at least 25 corporate accounts. And it looks like the software engineers can do 3 of those as well. The IT specialist can handle 1. And I guess we don't let our IT technicians do those at all, okay? What else is going on here? So I want to make sure that at least 50% of my total staff is either software engineers or IT specialists. So what am I going to need to do that? To model that constraint, I need what kind of variable? Summation variable. So I might as well do it. I'll say, I don't know, total. And we'll say SE plus ITS plus ITT minus total is equal to 0. That defined it. Or you could do the sum to define it, but define it. And we're saying SE and ITS, the software engineers and the IT specialist, have to be greater than or equal to 50% of the total. Or another way to look at that is minus 50% of total is greater than 0. And believe it or not, the fact that these are integer is actually a constraint. So I'm going to write that down here as well. SE, comma, ITS, comma, IT technician, all integer. Okay. And this is called an all integer linear program because all of the decision variables are integers. If there were some that were and some that weren't, that would be called a mixed integer linear program. This is an all integer linear program. So let's set this up. So if I go to Excel, and I'm going to do this one fairly quickly. Actually, let's do the bake a cake model. And I'm just going to bring up, this is on Blackboard as well. Under Chapter 3, on the bottom it says Miko Consulting. I want you to open that up. There it is. Okay. So, what I wanted to show you with this, I'm just going to start it all with ones. And a lot of this looks the same as the things we've been saying before. Okay, right there's, we put up our decision variables, we minimize our total cost. Here's our constraints 3, 5, 5, 13, 3, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, we define it, and then so we're modeling up here, okay? let's look at our solver and see what's a little bit different. If I go to my solver, I'm minimizing G4, that makes sense, by changing cell C to F2. I'm saying that I have to service at least 75, so I'm saying G6 through G7 is greater than or equal to I6 through I7. G8 is equal to I8, that's defining my constraint. And then G9 is greater than or equal to I9. Now, I'm going to delete this so we can re-add it. I have to add in that integer constraint. So the way I do that is I click add, and this is new, so pay attention. I click add, and I say, on this left-hand side, I say C2 through F2. And I want to make sure they're all integer. Now we have to hit this drop down, and instead of saying greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, I'm going to select the int. You see the int? And it puts integer over here. This is saying all of these cells have to be integer. So that's how I add that constraint into Excel Solver. I click solve. What the heck? And it ignored my integer constraint. All right, I think I know why. Well, might as well go through it. So I click solve, and it tells me 7.95, 1.13, 69, which are not integers. So let me go to solver, and I'll show you, because you might have this same thing. Go to solver, go to options, and there's a checkbox that says ignore integer constraints. I'm going to uncheck that box because I don't want it to ignore integer constraints. I don't know if your box will be checked or not, but if it is, uncheck it. And now I click solve, and it finds me a solution. Now notice something here. What don't I have as an option over here? Sensitivity report. So that's one of the reasons we avoid integer constraints, because we can't get a sensitivity constraint because it's not a smooth shape, this feasible region. I click OK. It says if you hire 7 software engineers, 4 IT specialists, 7 IT technicians, you'll have a total staff of 18 employees. They'll make approximately $26,000 weekly. You'll be able to service 76 personal accounts, 25 corporate accounts, and it looks like 11 of the 18 are software engineers or IT specialists, which is greater than 50% of my total staff. Okay, so the only thing really new there is that last part that I showed you, how we add in the integer constraint. Okay, all we do is we go to solver. When we go to the constraint, we say whatever the things we want to be integer on the left-hand side, and we use the drop down and select int. So that one's pretty easy, right? Integer is not so bad. It's just, saying it has to be a counting number. The one that's a little bit, I want to spend some more time on, that's why I kind of went through that quickly, is binary. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about binary. What does binary mean? Some of you guys are technical, have technical careers, probably know what binary means. What does binary mean? What's a binary event or something modeled as binary? What does binary mean? What's a binary number? So integer is any counting number, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's binary? What's it limited to? It's 2 numbers. What are the 2 numbers, Adam? How everything is stored in the computer. Everything is stored as a series of these.
0, 1.
Zeros and ones, right? Zeros and ones. Binary is based on base 2, meaning 2 outcomes. 0, you're not doing it. 1, you are doing it. Yes, no, good, bad. We got FDA approval. We didn't get FDA approval, right? It's a go, no go kind of thing. A lot of things in business are modeled that way. Do we hire this extra person? Do we approve overtime? Do we build the hotel, right? They're yes or no kind of decisions. Do we do this project? Do we hire this person? Do we fire this person? Those are all binary, yes or no kind of things. So binary variables are good at modeling those kinds of situations. 0, it's off. 1, it's on. So a couple things. Let's take a look at the slides, and then I'm going to deviate from the slides a little bit. Any decision situation that can be modeled, yes, no, good, bad, falls into the binary category. Okay. X1, X, if a new healthcare plan is adopted, it's a 1. If it's not, it's a 0. If a new police station is built downtown, it's a 1. If it's not, it's a 0. Particular constraint must hold, it's a 1. If not, it's a 0. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples. Let's say I'm choosing between 3 projects. Okay, let's say I'm choosing between 3 projects. I'm saying I can build a male dorm, a female dorm, or a I don't know, a concert hall. I don't know. Okay, those are my 3 options. Those are my 3 projects. Those are binary variables because I either build the male dorm or I don't build it. I can't build half a male dorm and say live in there, right? I can't build half a concert hall and say have a concert there. It's either I do it or not. So these are binary variables, right? Now, the trick comes in when we talk about how we use those, all right? So let's say we have something like this. You go to the president of the university, Father Malachi, and he tells you, I want you to choose what projects to do for the next 5 years, but whatever you do, you have to do a male dorm before you do a female dorm. Okay, so he says, the male dorm takes priority over the female dorm. It says it like that to you. If we look at those 2 variables, let's look at those 2 variables. MD is the male dorm, FD is the female dorm. What are the options we can have for those 2 things? Remember, they each can take on the values of 0 or 1. So what's it look like if we do neither? 0, 0, right? What's it look like if we do both? 1, 1. What if we do the male dorm and not the female dorm? It looks like 1, 0. If we do the female dorm without the male dorm, it looks like this, right? So I go to Father Malachi, the president of the university. He says, hey, I don't care if you don't do either. I don't care if you do both. But the male dorm takes priority over the female dorm. What he's basically telling me is, I don't want this to happen, right? This is okay. This is okay. This is okay. I don't want this to happen. I don't want a female dorm built without a male dorm built, okay? How would I model that as a constraint? And when we think about that, what is true in these 3 cases that's not true here? What is true in these 3 cases that's not true here? How would we model that? Thurston, go ahead.
MD's equal or less than?
You had it. Reverse it.
Or greater than?
Right. In each of these 3 cases, right, MD is greater than or equal to FD, right? In this case, it's not. But in these 3 cases that are okay, it's greater than or equal to. This one, it's not. So the way we would write this as a constraint is, hey, MD has to be greater than or equal to FD. These 3 are okay, this one's not. Remember, I always want a constant on the right-hand side? So I'd write it as MD minus FD is greater than or equal to 0. That's saying that, hey, I can't build a female dorm without a male dorm, right? Yes. I know this does take some practice, I know. What if I go to Father Malachi and he says this to me? He says, John, not that I'm building dorms, but he says, we can't do them separately. So we either do the male dorm with the female dorm or we do neither. But we can't build the male dorm without the female dorm because then the females will be mad. And we can't build the female dorm without the male dorm because the males will be mad. Either they're done together or not at all. So how would we model that? So think about that. He tells me in words, either we do them together or not at all. Let's see. in Father Malachi's new proposal, is that okay to do neither? Yeah, that's okay. Is this okay? That's okay. Is this? No. Is this? No. So what's true in those first two cases that's violated in those last two? What's true about the first two that holds but is violated in the second two? Very good. FD or MD is equal to FD, whichever way you want to look at it. Another way to write that is what? MD minus FD is equal to 0. That models the situation whether it's done together or not at all. Yes? What if he tells me this? He said, we have 3 projects here. Male dorm, female dorm, concert hall. He says, I don't want to overcommit us. So I don't know what to do, but in the next 5 years, we can't do more than 2 of them. Okay? In the next 5 years, we can't do more than 2 of them. So think about that. The sum of all the projects we do can't be more than 2. So how would I write that, do you think? Because they're binary, MD plus FD plus CH less than or equal to 2. Because if they're all on, 1, 1, 1, right? If they're all on, we do them all. 3 is not less than or equal to 2. Violates. How about this? Let's say we have costs. The architects have given us costs for these things. And this one cost, I don't know, let's say this one costs 8 million. This one costs 10. And this one costs 6. And he tells us we have $18 million in the budget for the next 5 years for new capital campaign projects. I want to make sure I don't blow that budget. I know the most I have is 18 million. How would I write that? Because think about it, I could do this alone, or this alone. I could do these 2 together, I'm okay. I could do these 2 together, I'm okay. I could do these 2 together, I'm okay. Can't do all 3. There's a lot of combinations there, right? So how do I think about it a little simpler? If I do the male dorm, how much does it cost me? So 8 times MD. Because if I do it, it's 1, right? 1 times 8 is 8. $8 million. If I don't do it, it's 0. 0 times 8 is 0. I don't realize the cost. Plus 10 FD plus 6 CH. That'll do it for me. Okay. Let's take a look at some of the books examples. And then we're going to do one of these. Go ahead.
So say you have $18 million. So
Right.
Does that mean that you have $18 million to spread over the 3 of those?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Not each. $18 million total. And actually, what this is used for a lot, binary models are well, obviously very good decisions, but they're good for, and what we're going to do one tonight is called a project selection model. Okay. You know, you don't have to be like thinking about your corporate life to know that, but like even in your personal life, you know, maybe there's things that need done around the house. Like, oh, I need a new roof, I want a deck, I want to go on vacation, right? You have these projects you can do or not do, right? And you say, I have this much money to work with, I have this much time. You know, a lot of times we do these things through conversation and, you know, even in an organization, it's political sometimes, whoever pressures the most or you know, whoever's yelling the loudest, right? This is a way to look at a list of projects and say, you know, assign maybe values to them, maybe net present value or other monetary values, and say, what makes the most sense to do? You know, and then factoring in things like, you know, we can only do this one with this one, or we have to do at least 2 from this area because we don't want to ignore this area, or we don't want to ignore that area, okay? So we can try to factor all those things in. And instead of it becoming a political game, when I was at the bank, it was very much a political game. it becomes much more, it becomes much more non-subjective, much more objective process. Maybe that's the starting point, and then the politics get involved, but at least it gives a starting point. So some examples here. Let's look at some examples here. We're talking about y1, y2, y3 are 3 plants. They're binary variables. At least 2 plants must be built would look like this. y1 plus y2 plus y3 has to be greater than or equal to 2. It doesn't tell us what 2 plants, but at least 2 of the 3 have to be built. y1 and y2 can be on, y3 off. All 3 of them can be on, that's fine. y3 and y1 can be on, y2 and y3 can be on, right? It takes into account all of those factors simply mathematically. If plant 1 is built, plant 2 must not be built. I don't think I did one of these, but what this is saying is, I can't build both, right? So y1 plus y2 has to be less than or equal to 1. It's basically saying, kind of like we did here, but in this case, we're only saying we have 2 projects. We have to do 1 or less. We can do neither, or we can do 1. That's it, we can't do both. Okay? If plant 1 is built, plant 2 must be built. This is one saying, if you think about it, y1 is less than or equal to y2. So y2 is the dominant project, if you will. y2 is greater than y1. So I can do y2 alone, but I can't do y1 alone. Okay, that was like when we did this guy here, right? Male dorm has to be built before a female dorm. We said MD greater than FD, or MD minus FD is greater than 0. That's what we're saying there. One but not both plants must be built. If we're forcing it to build 1 plant, if Father Malachi said to me, we need to pick 1 and only 1 of those projects, it would look a little different. It would be MD plus FD plus CH is equal to 1, right? Force 1 and only 1, that's equal. Both or neither plants must be built. Anytime we're talking about things need to be done together, it's equality, right? So both, they either have to be done together or not at all. MD is equal to FD, MD minus FD is equal to 0. And then finally, given the cost to build plants are 5, 6, 8, and 10 million, we have 17 million. Well, 5y1 plus 8y2 plus 10y3 is less than or equal to 17. The one I'd like to do, okay, it's a big one, but it has all of these constraints in them, and I think it's worth our time to go through together. It's in your book. It's on page 152 and 153. And I also have it up here. And I'll give you a little bit of time to digest it. But then we're going to do this one, okay? We're going to try to model all of the constraints associated with this thing. This is on page 151 to 152 and 153. So take like 5 minutes or so. Read through that. This is a summary up here, and then we'll go through it and model it together. Okay, so let's set the stage here. We are Salem City Council, and we are trying to decide on which of these 9 projects to do in the upcoming year. Okay, the 9 projects are up here. Hire 7 new police officers, modernize police headquarters, buy new. You guys can see those. Now, each of them is a project, and each of them is a project that we either do or we don't do. Okay, so what does that sound like it lends itself well to? A binary variable, right? So each of those projects is represented by X1 through X9. X1 is, buy 2 new or hire 7 new police officers. X2 would be modernize police headquarters. I'm not going to write them all out, but we have 9 decision variables, X1 through X9. Do it or don't do it, right? 9 times we have to make that decision. That's our decision variable. Okay. What is the thing we're trying to minimize or maximize here? What are we trying to get the biggest of or the lowest of? What are we trying to optimize here? Yeah, it says we want to maximize public support, right? Because we want to see that we're doing a good job. for its decision as evidence through the return questionnaire. So this is interesting. What we did to see how much things were worth is we did a survey and said, hey, to our constituents, what do you vote for? Like basically, what would you, if we could do anything, what would you do? And we went through this point method, and we have these points assigned to projects, right? So looks like this was the most popular one, and that was the least popular one, right? 4176, 962. What we call those is utility points. You guys know what utility is? Like there's values and there's utility. Utility is like the happiness I get from something, right? So these are utility points, and sometimes maybe even in your own townships or municipalities, sometimes you get surveys, like recreation surveys, like what would you like to see? Because they're supposed to hear from their constituents and say, what would you want? And factor that in. So they've tried to factor that in. So we want to maximize overall happiness in Salem. So we would maximize 4,176 x1 plus 1,774 x2 the whole way to plus 3,003 x9. And what that is showing is if we do that project, we get those points, right? If we hire 7 new police officers, great. We realize those 4,000 points. If we don't, 0 times 4,176 is still 0, right? So that's what we're trying to maximize. All right, all well and good. Now let's see the constraints we have cooking here. It says we only have 900,000. That's a big constraint, right? I can't do them all. I can only do $900,000 worth. But let's see. The first one takes 400,000. So if I do it, I'm cutting in to 400,000, right? So it's 400x1. The second one takes 350. The third one, I don't care about the third one, but I would write them all out, and I would say the last one is plus 140x9. And what about that function? It has to be less than or equal to 400,000. Does that make sense? We can't do them all. The combination of what we do has to be less than or equal to 400,000. Yes?
900.
Thank you. 900,000. Okay. Now here's where it gets interesting. The council wants to create at least 10 jobs. At least means what? Greater than or equal to. Okay, so that's a constraint. At least we have to. If we do 1, how many jobs do we create? So that would be 7x1. If we do 2, how many jobs do we create? Plus 0x2. We do 3, we create 1 job. We do 4, looks like another 0 job deal. The whole way, we'd have to go the whole way to plus 2x9. Does that make sense? So if we do it, we get those jobs. If we don't do it, we don't get those jobs, right? We want to create at least 10. The third bullet point says fund at most 3 of the police projects. Well, let's see, where are the police projects? 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all police projects, are they not? And we want to do at most 3 of them. So if we add them, x1 plus x2 plus x3 plus x4, at most 3, that has to be less than or equal to 3, right? You with me? Perform only one of the 2 emergency vehicle projects. Perform only one of the 2 vehicle projects. Emergency vehicle projects. So this is saying, and it didn't really go into detail here, but it says we have to do one of them and one only. We can't do both, we can't do neither. Of the 2, we have to do one of them. It looks like the emergency vehicle ones are, what, 3 and 5. Okay, the fire truck or the police cars. So the combination of x3 plus x5 has to equal 1. We have to do one of those and one only. Good? Okay. Sports and music funds must be restored together or not at all. That looks like it's 7 and 8. Because if I do music, without sports, the sports people will be mad. If I do sports without music, vice versa, right? So they're either done together or not at all. What would that look like? X7 and X8 have to be what? Okay, X7 and X8 have to be equal, or another way to write that is X7 minus X8 is equal to 0. Does that make sense? They either both have to be on, or they both have to be off. That's the only way they get to 0. 1 and 1, or 0 and 0. If one's on, one's off, we get a -1. If the other one's on and the other one's off, we get a +1. They're not equal to 0. We saw that. And the last thing it says, school funding must be restored before new school projects are funded. So, it's in our contract. Basically what they're saying is, we can't do this one, Project 9, unless 7's done and 9's done, right? We can't do 9, we can't buy new computers until we restore the cuts that we made last year. So we have to look at those as two separate constraints. X7 has to be done before X9. So a way to say that is X7 has to be greater than or equal to X9. Right? It has to dominate, X7 has to dominate X9, or X7 minus X9 is greater than or equal to 0. And the same thing with our other cuts, our music cuts. X8 has to be greater than or equal to 0. Now, go ahead, Eric.
Is that last one necessary because 2 constraints up, it's already binding that if 7's done, 8 has to be done?
You're right. So what Eric pointed out is, hey, if 7's on, 8's on, right? So what that will do is necessarily it'll force, if this is done, it'll force 8 on, and if 8's on, it'll force 7 on, and 7 has to be greater than 9. So yeah, you're right. It's not necessary. I would put it in though. I mean, if you think about it, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Think about the combinations. We have 9 projects, right? Each can be on or off. So the combination of projects we can do is 2 to the 9th. Now, I know 2 to the 7th is what? 2 to the 7th is 1,024, I think. There's like I don't know, 2 to the 9th is a big number. Okay, it's a couple thousand combinations. I can't go through all those combinations in my head, right? It's hard to do. But what can do that is if I set up this model, Excel can do it, right? Solver can do it. Now, this one becomes a monstrosity, obviously, right? It's a big deal, right? It's a big project, a big model, I'm sorry. So if I look at that, and it's in here, the final model, it looks like this, right? A lot of stuff going on. We put it on the board, but I abbreviated. I abbreviated all the middle parts. But this is the model, okay? This is the model. Now, when we enter this into Excel, and I don't think I have it to enter in Excel, but what we do is instead of saying integer, there is an option down here for bin, and bin means binary, okay? So that's, Excel-wise, that's the only difference, integer versus binary. The hard thing with binary is thinking of the concepts. We don't, as humans, think 1s and 0s, right? We don't. We've been brought up to think base 10 our whole lives, but inside computers, it's all 1s and 0s, right? This is the logic. This is the way logic works inside computers. So it's kind of going, I guess, down a level. There's not any of these on your take-home. There's no binary on your take-home. There is an integer one, that health one, that health staffing model. It's kind of like that Miko consulting model, okay? So now you've been presented all the material that is necessary for you to do the midterm take-home, okay? You have all that in your grasp at this point. So here's what I'd like you to do for homework for next week. I would like you to do number, let's see, 28, go ahead, take a shot at 28. I like 34 a lot. 34 is a very good one. It's a binary one. 35 is an integer one. That's good. Don't do 38. So do 28, 34, and 35. Okay, those three. And you can also start on your table. All right, so as always, if you have any questions, specific problems with Excel, I'll hang out here after class and be more than happy to help you. If not, have a safe drive home and have a nice week.